road work ahead. Theo begins with a big, dumb grin on his face. I can see the whites of his teeth in the corner of my eye. Don't say it, bro, I interrupt, my fingers flexing on the steering wheel. You don't need to say it. Yeah, I sure hope it does, he finishes, chuckling as I mutter under my breath. I've always hated that stupid vine. How are we doing on time, I ask him, changing the subject. He checks his watch, his phone, and the car's clock. All in sync, dude. 2:17 a.m. We've got 5 minutes. Perfect, I respond as we drive down the length of a dark and empty highway. We're actually going to make it this time. Have we got far to go? No, I tell him. Just a bit further on. It's hard to see, but there are a lot of hills just ahead to the right. That's where we're going. Right, he responds, settling back into his seat. The highway stretches through a long, dark section of the country. There aren't many trees, but the cornfields grow high, tapering off as the hills rise. There's a subtle turnoff from the highway coming up, leading through these hills. That's where we're headed. You have to time it just right if you want to play the roadworks game. The clock ticks. 2:18 a.m. Damn, we're actually going to make it, I reply. Are you nervous, man? Nervous, Theo laughs. Nothing's going to happen, Dara. It is, I'm telling you. It's been done before, I reply as we race through the night, the engine a subtle backing track. Yeah, we'll see about that, Theo says as the corn and the hills roll by. The time ticks on. I shift in my seat, my throat going dry. Though Theo refuses to admit it, he's anxious too. The atmosphere in the vehicle has changed. We're here, I murmur, slowing the car as the clock ticks over to 2:21. Turn right. Then you have reached your destination, the voice of the GPS announces. I do so, bringing the wheel around in an arc and turning off from the highway. I wind the car between the hills that rise up around us. At last, just as the clock hits 2:22, we come to a stop at a traffic light. It appears to be a temporary installment, but I've never known it not to be here. It is accompanied by a rusted yellow sign with a Kansas Construction logo printed in small letters on the top left. In the sign center, it reads simply Road Works. The traffic light's glow is red, highlighting our faces in its crimson glow. Nothing's happening, Theo mutters. Did we get the timings wrong? A part of me is disappointed, but a much greater part of me is relieved. Perhaps this was a dumb idea anyway. And then, as if in response to this thought, the traffic light does something I've never seen it do before. It changes to yellow, illuminating the road beneath it in bright amber. My adrenaline surges. Damn, Theo blurts out. He tries to say something but stumbles over his words. I don't speak. I know how to begin the game. And it's really very simple. I slam my foot down on the accelerator and the car lurches back into life. The vehicle leaps forward and I wind it around the traffic light and down through the hills. The time ticks to 2:23. We meander left and right, passing between hills of various heights and sizes as I expected. But then, the landscape changes. Instead of coming out of the hills and being led onto a parallel highway, as geography would expect, we are instead met with a vast, flat landscape as the hills pull back. It is a moonless night, and our only source of light comes from the beams of the car itself. Ahead is the road, and to either side are grim and empty fields, sparse pieces of rotted fence, dead crops, all fading away into the void at the light's edge, the total and surrounding darkness of the night. My heart pounds. Jesus, Theo says. Oh God, this is real, it's real, we're actually playing. Of course we are, I reply. I told you so. Remind me how it works again. His voice is tinged with fear now. I can hear it. The rules. What do we win? They say that the game gives you what you need the most. Great, he forces out a weak laugh. PlayStation 5 it is, then. Yeah, maybe, I reply, deadpan. If we win, what do you want? It's what you need, not what you want, Theo. Fine, what do you need? I consider. I don't know, man. A new family would be a good start. A new life. Theo does not respond directly to this. We've talked about it before. Instead, he changes the subject. You said, if we win, if. So how do we lose? I don't reply. I just grip the wheel a little tighter. We just have to stay on the road till the end, I say eventually. That's the rule of the game. Don't leave the road. Follow the road till the end. Till the end, he repeats. And we are quiet for a while after that, driving steadily through the wastes in the shadow. The tension rises until Theo can take it no longer. Let's put some tunes on, he says, tapping play on his phone, still auxed. What the hell, I ask him as the intro to Toto's Africa starts blaring obnoxiously from the speakers. Bro, turn that off. Why, he asks, holding his phone away out of reach. It's a banger, he starts humming along to the opening beat. Theo, turn it off, I reach out again, trying to grab his phone. Why? It's not against the rules, is it? He starts to sing along. I look down to the OEX and pull it from the plug. In that second, the split second that I have my eyes away from the road, the car drifts ever so slightly, and with a loud and sickening crunch, it lurches up and then back down with a thud. Christ, Theo shouts as we are slammed up and down in our seats. Panicked, I swing the steering wheel around and press my foot down on the brake, and the tires screech as the car comes to a quick stop, still on the road but now at a slight angle. We turn to look through the rear window. My pulse is racing. Theo is grabbing my shoulder. Dara, you hit something. Oh God, what was it? Is it moving? I squint. It wasn't a person, was it? Did you see any movement? No, but I mean it was dark, so. You were distracting me. Me? What the hell, dude? But our fight comes to a quick halt as a beep bids us turn swiftly around. The GPS has begun to glitch and blink. Its pleasant white glow screen now shines in a sinister warning red. Black text appears across the ruby screen, follow the road. We stare at this text, Theo and I. Then Theo glances back over his shoulder. His eyes widen. Bro, he mutters. It's gone. I turn around to look, and sure enough, the large dark shape that we hid in the road has vanished. I think we need to keep driving now, Theo says, as a creeping, lurking terror begins to slink into my mind. I don't respond. I don't need to. I just sit back in my seat, push down the handbrake, and drive us off, quicker this time than I was driving before. The GPS remains unchanged, black text on a red background. The car sails through the night. Was that part of the game, I ask Theo. Do you think? I don't know, dude. You know more about this game than me. It just disappeared. It must have been alive. Well, if it moved, then it must be fine, right? It wouldn't be a person. What would a person be doing on foot out here? Well, if it wasn't a person, then what was it? Theo has no response. My hands are clammy with sweat now. I wipe them one at a time on the side of my jeans. Dude, Theo murmurs. There's something in the fields. What do you mean? Look, he says quietly. And I do, peering to my left, then to my right. I can't help but catch glimpses of rustling in the long grasses. The headlights catch curious little shadows darting between the broken fence posts, but every time I try to look directly at one, it has already disappeared. More and more of this rustling takes place around us, shivering grass, small little shadows, dozens, then hundreds. I put my foot down on the accelerator, and the car picks up speed. Maybe we should turn back, Theo asks out loud then. We should turn back, bro. We should turn the hell back. No, I reply, determined. We're committed. We have to see the road through to the end. That's the rules. The quivering little shapes in the grasses fall back and away. The lights of the car catch on a person standing a little ways down the road. Oh my God, Theo yells. Look out. I swerve hard to avoid the figure. The car glides past her. I catch her face in the headlights just for a moment, a split second. It's a middle-aged woman, or at least it was once. She's wearing a tattered yellow jacket, the kind that workers wear on construction sites. Her clothes are filthy. She looks like she's been walking through mud for hours. She does not scream as the car approaches, she just stares, unblinking, right into my eyes. Her jaw is slowly working up and down, but no sound escapes her open mouth. Fing hell, Theo shouts, the blood drained from his face. I keep driving, and after the briefest hesitation, Theo's eyes snap forward, and he looks out of the rear window. She's gone, he breathes, his voice shaking. She's gone, man. She just vanished. Don't look back, Theo, I tell him. Don't look back, he turns back around and stares out the front window instead. I tell myself to focus on the road, and we follow the road. The clock ticks over to 2:25 a.m. We approach another temporary traffic light. It is dead off. No light shines from it. Beside it, another sign stands. The sign, identical to the first, now reads "End of Road Works." Theo exhales deeply. Thank Christ. I was starting to get really freaked out there, he says. As he speaks, the road ahead begins to change. It is so subtle at first that I almost don't notice. The road is getting narrower, bit by bit, foot by foot, growing tighter and tighter. The edge of the car's wheels slowly grazes the dirt at the road sides. Is it getting tighter, or is it just me, Theo asks with a forced chuckle. It's getting tighter, I reply, leaning forward. Damn. How much further do you think we've got? I don't know, Theo. I really don't know. Do we turn around? He looks at me, and the fear on his face has returned. No, he replies quietly. Let's see it through. If we turn around now, we'll regret it forever. The car presses forward. The road continues to narrow. The door is nearly scraping against the dirt walls of the path, and then with another sudden drop, the earth falls away, and we shoot out and over a wide, murky river. The concrete highway glistens as it passes beneath us, but it is thin, precariously thin. Only a few more meters, and the edges will scrape the car doors, and we will be trapped. I press down harder on the gas, but the car, instead of responding to my command, begins to gradually slow down. Come on, I mutter under my breath. Come on, you piece of crap. Dara, something's on the road. It's in the way. I squint, and sure enough, a shadowy figure, barely more than a shadow, has appeared ahead. It is a single worker, standing in the middle of the road. He's wearing a hard hat. He is facing away from us. I can't even see his face. "What is he doing?" Theo asks in a panic. Is he real, or is he some part of the game? I don't know, bro. Should we drive around him? There's no way to fit the car past him. Drive through him then. Just hit him. I hesitate, but as the car begins to grind to a halt, I press my foot down hard. It does little to help. The wheels squeal as they struggle to grip the road. The needle of the speedometer creeps to 0. Oh God, Dara, drive. We need to drive. We need to. He stops dead as the worker turns to face us. The man is old beyond years. His flesh hangs from his skull, revealing bone and open wounds beneath. He grins at us. His eye sockets are empty and black. But we can't escape. The car comes to a complete stop as the road grinds to an end. All I hear is silence. There's nothing else, no sound at all. No birds, no wind, no traffic, just silence. I am too scared to even try to reverse. The worker leans toward the car. I panic. Theo is shaking me by the shoulder, but I ignore him. All my focus is on the old man. My heart races. It feels like it's going to break through my rib cage. But then the old man starts to sing. It starts as a murmur, but as the seconds go by, his voice gets louder. He hums a quiet and terrible melody. He starts to sing softly, under his breath. I don't recognize the words. They aren't in English or any other language I've ever heard. They're nonsense. Gibberish. But their meaning is terrifying all the same. The worker slowly steps around the car and walks back the way we came, crossing in front of us and heading down the highway. And as he moves, more workers begin to appear. They rise from the dirt, from the road, from the fields, pulling themselves up from the depths of the earth. One by one they appear, silent, empty. Workers in yellow jackets. The workers, tall and gaunt, begin to turn in our direction, humming and singing the same song as the first. I turn the key in the ignition, trying to start the car again, but the engine just coughs and splutters. They're getting closer. Theo breathes. Get out of the car, I shout. Theo's door opens with a creak. He steps out, his hands shaking. I fumble with my seatbelt and practically throw myself from the car. We have no idea where to go. There is only the thin strip of road with the silent river on either side. The workers approach in droves now, surrounding the car and approaching us with their vacant eyes. Theo, man, we're screwed. Maybe Theo replies. But maybe we aren't. This is the game, right? The game gives you what you need the most. What are you talking about? I'm saying maybe this is what I need. And before I can stop him, Theo walks right up to the nearest worker, and with eyes full of tears and teeth gritted in terror, he grabs the man's hands. The worker looks down at him. What are you doing, Theo? I shout. This is what I need, Dara. I'm sorry. And then, without warning, the worker reaches forward and wraps his arms around Theo. I run toward them, but I'm too slow. Theo slumps, his eyes rolling back in his head as the worker tightens his grip. I try to pull them apart, but the worker's grip is iron. Theo's body is limp. His eyes are closed, and then he collapses to the ground. The worker releases him and begins to step toward me. Theo's breathing slows and stops. The worker's eyes, vacant and black, look deep into mine. His mouth opens wide, and from deep within his throat comes a ghastly shriek. I stumble backward, terrified. I trip and fall into the river below. The cold water envelops me, and for a moment, everything is silent again. I swim to the surface, gasping for air. When I emerge, the workers have vanished. The road, the signs, everything is gone. It's as if it never existed. I drag myself to the shore, breathing heavily. My heart pounds in my chest as I lie on the cold, wet ground, staring up at the starless sky. Theo is gone. The game is over. But I know I'll never be free of it. My friends and I decided to see the country. We had grown up around the Sacramento area, and as much as we loved our native California, we knew the lower West Coast hardly represented the United States. There is a huge stretch of land between the coasts called America, or so some would have you believe. I didn't want to go off to college and into full-time work without having a story or two to tell my dorm mates. Cut to about 3 days into the journey, we're on our way to our first real stop in Boise, Idaho. My buddy hooked his iPhone up to the minivan speakers via an auxiliary cable and played every single road trip-related song he could find. I might have been annoyed if his music taste wasn't so good. Keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel, we all roared along with Jim Morrison, Roadhouse Blues blasting so loud I could barely hear the van's engine. It was so much fun. We dreamed up the ultimate road trip, and now we're actually living it. I didn't even need a beer to feel the buzz of it. Just a few miles outside of Boise, saw someone standing by the side of the road in the distance. It's important to remember the frame of mind we were in, romanticizing the road. We were all Jack Kerouac that day. I mean, I'd never normally stop for a hitchhiker. I'd watched way too many horror films. But since there were 4 of us packed into that van, a kind of collective bravado had taken over us. As we passed the dude and saw he actually had his thumb out, we collectively flipped. I stopped the van in the middle of the road and slowly started reversing up towards where this guy stood. In a ride, dude, he instantly looked elated. He'd obviously had no luck for a few good hours, and a van full of teenagers was like a godsend to him. I could kind of see why people might pass him. He looked a little rough, with this weird kind of young old vibe going on. Like his clothes were fairly modern, but his skin was leathery as all get out, like he'd spent all day underneath the Utah or Nevada sun. "Hey, why all going to Boise?" asked in a gravelly voice. "Sure are, dude. Hop in." So the guy told us his name was Jimmy and that he was from Idaho originally but had spent a lot of time out of state for work. We asked him what he did for a living, and he gave us some weird answer about being a contractor. He said his last job was really constrictive, and he was happy to get away from it and was just heading back into Boise, some old friends. He started telling us stories from time to time on the road, and it sounded like he was something of a wild child in the early 80s. He went to California looking for work and ended up getting in a few scrapes with the law. At one point, one of my buddies asked Jimmy if he'd spent any time inside. I really don't know what he expected the answer to be, but all of a sudden, Jimmy's tone changed completely as he shot my friend a daggered look. "No, and I don't ever intend to," he replied contemptuously. The atmosphere in the van shifted. It was super awkward for a few miles, but the conversation soon returned to normal, with us swapping stories and sharing laughs. After about an hour or so of continuous driving, we were getting closer and closer to Boise's. But it was around then that we hit our first serious speed bump. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw an Idaho State Police cruiser speeding up behind us. I moved over a little to let it pass, only it didn't. Then Jimmy saw the cop car and ducked down in the seat. We started laughing and joking about him being a fugitive or something, but he didn't join in. He just stayed down in the seat and didn't make a sound. As soon as the cop car's lights turned on and the siren blared across the highway, I knew what was about to happen. It was like I could see the whole thing pan out in my head in slow motion, and I was powerless to do anything to stop it. It was far too late for that. I actually started slowing down to pull over, purely wishful thinking on my part. I expected to hear Jimmy say something, and I was right, only it wasn't him that spoke first. "What? You have a gun?" one of my buddies cried. "You keep this thing moving. Don't stop for nothing." I heard him cock the hammer on his weapon. I didn't even turn around to see what it was. "You slow this van down, and I must shoot every single one of you you hear." I've never been so scared in my entire life. I could hear the cop shouting over his loudspeaker, "Driver, pull the vehicle over to the side of the road right now," but I couldn't. We were trapped. It was only about then that I checked the fuel gauge out of habit. It turned out to be a godsend. In our foolish revelry, we had passed numerous gas stations we really should have stopped at to refuel. Now we only had a few miles worth of gas. All we'd have to do was wait for it to run out. I remember feigning a kind of solidarity with the guy, assuring him I wouldn't pull over until we'd passed the state lines on the other side of Boise. My buddies must have thought I was nuts, but they didn't know what I did. They didn't know that all we had to do was run the clock out. "Oh, we're running out of gas." "I'm sorry, dude. I'm gonna have to pull over." "Your best chance is to just jump out and run. Just run and never look back." Jimmy ate it up. It was an Oscar-winning performance, if I do say so myself. He actually patted me on the shoulder as I slowed the van down and edged over to the roadside. "You're a good kid. You'll do all right," he said. I remember his breath smelling rotten. When I finally pulled the car over, one of my buddies slid the van door open, and Jimmy hauled it into the trees. One of the cops jumped out, securing us in the van, while his partner got this big dog from the back seat of their cruiser and chased the guy through the woods. We were there for an hour or two while the cops searched our van, but we didn't have anything illegal on us, thank God. We had finished all the beer we'd managed to wrangle the night before, or we might have actually had something to worry about. Once it was established that the guy was basically holding us hostage, they let us go. One of the cops actually told me I did the right thing. They didn't catch him, and as far as I know, they never have. Whatever the case, I know Jimmy can't have been the dude's real name. No one was hurt, nothing was damaged, but still I have zero intention of ever picking up a hitchhiker again. A few years ago, a friend and I were getting pretty sick of the New England weather. We get our fair share of sunshine up here, but only for about 3 weeks out of 52. After one particularly washout summer where the sky barely shifted from its regular gray tone, we decided on a road trip to alleviate the rain-soaked misery. We didn't have a destination in mind, just a direction south, as far south as we could go without having to buy a Spanish phrase book. About a fortnight in, we'd made it all the way down to New Mexico. I enjoyed the barbecue in South Carolina and relished the peach cobbler in Georgia, but nothing compared to the food in New Mexico. I thought I'd been eating good Mexican food back home, but I realized I had been eating lies. It turns out the closer you get to the border, the better the food gets. Mexican food isn't all about spice, although that is a big part of it. There's tangy, fruity salsa made from pineapples and the smoky flavor that ancho chili imparts to dishes. We were so charmed by New Mexico that instead of rolling through it into Arizona like we planned, we decided to tour a little more of the state before leaving. This meant rolling down dusty roads, visiting little cowboy towns, and taquito joints along the way. At one point, still a few hundred miles away from our planned stop, we were getting pretty tired. Driving at night can be disorienting and dangerous, so we decided to pull over and sleep a few hours until dawn before getting back on the road. The only problem was finding somewhere safe to park. When I pictured New Mexico, I imagined adobe brown desert scenes made famous by old westerns, but as it turns out, New Mexico has its fair share of snow-capped mountains and lush green forests. We happened to be driving by one such patch of tall pines when we called our rest stop. We pulled in, turned down a dirt road, and wound among the trees, taking it slow, trying to find a turnoff for a campground to park up and get some shut-eye. It took a while, but we found one, parked up, and turned off the engine before unpacking our sleeping gear and leaning back the seats. As you can imagine, New Mexico gets real warm and stays real warm well into the night. So although it leaves us prey to mosquitoes, cracking the window to allow some much-needed fresh air in was essential. It was actually kind of nice for a while, lying there, drifting off with the sound of crickets chirping and coyotes yipping in the hills. It was relaxing listening to the sounds of nature until I heard a sound that was distinctly unrelaxed, the sound of hushed human voices. My eyes opened in darkness as I strained to hear just what these voices were saying. I couldn't make out anything specific, just that at least two people were talking amongst themselves in hushed tones. This was a big red flag for me. Sometimes you get people walking past your car when you're trying to sleep, mostly in cities, but sometimes out in the sticks too. If they're loud, it generally means they're just drunk and heading home. Sure, drunk can be another kind of red flag for danger, but not nearly as much as actual hushed voices. Whispers mean a person doesn't want to be heard. Whispers mean someone is up to no good. Although we're from a state where legislation has made firearm ownership pretty much next to impossible, we weren't about to roll down to the deep south without proper protection. Not so much from the people. All our interactions with people in the southern states were overwhelmingly positive, but there's no reasoning with a bear or a rattlesnake. So we stopped at the first gun show we found in West Virginia to pick up something small but powerful, a .44 snub-nose revolver. The moment I heard those hushed whispering voices, I popped the glove compartment and took it out. After making sure it was loaded, I leaned over to my buddy and gently shook him awake. "Huh? What? What time is it?" His eyes were bloodshot, his voice croaky. "Listen to me," I said. The fear in my voice had him paying attention. "There's someone outside." We talked it over countless times, what we'd do if someone tried to rob or kidnap us. What was at first a morbid mental exercise had suddenly become all too real. We decided to get out and confront whoever was out there, hoping they'd hear that we were armed and scared and take off. It could have just been a few kids hanging around drinking, but it's always better to be safe than sorry. So we got out, me with the flashlight in one hand, the revolver in the other. We were both shining flashlights into the trees, but seeing nothing. We hadn't heard any voices since we got out of the car, and I was hoping they just moved on. But like I said, better safe than sorry. "Hey, anyone there?" my buddy called out into the darkness. We gave it a minute or so, and no one replied, but that didn't mean we felt safe and sound. So we started walking into the trees, trying to find whoever was whispering. I expected to find a handful of thugs who were going to rob us of our car and wallets, but what we found was much, much worse. The thing that hit me first was the smell. The further we got into the trees, the stronger the sickly sweet smell of hot garbage seemed to be. Neither of us had ever smelled anything like it in our lives, so it wasn't like we had anything to compare it to. It wasn't like we recognized it or anything. Then we saw the pit. The shadow of the ground opened up before us, and we saw the shovels, the plastic sheets stained with something brownish red. Flies were buzzing around the open pit so loud I could barely hear my own voice when I exclaimed in pure horror. And what lay at the bottom? It was a body, a human body, only it was barely recognizable as one. It had been beaten so badly it looked like a monster, a hideous imitation of the human form. The face was swollen, bloodied, and bruised, eyelids swollen shut, Huge busted lips still leaked gore onto the neck and chin. We ran, got into our car and got out of there. What followed was probably the most terrifying few minutes of my life. I expected to see another vehicle's lights appear on the road behind us, getting bigger as they got closer, chasing us down to silence us forever. But they didn't. Nothing happened. The adrenaline had us so wired that we drove all night to the next town, calling in at a local sheriff's department as soon as we arrived. We didn't stay long in that area, so naturally we didn't hear back from the cops regarding what happened to the body or if they found the guys trying to bury it. But I still think about it every now and then and what that poor person could have possibly done to deserve to die in such a way. This summer, my 17-year-old daughter was working a late-night shift. It was a little after midnight when I left to pick her up. When I stepped outside, it was eerily silent. You couldn't hear the frogs or insects. Nothing. I stood there just waiting to hear them again, but I had this awful feeling something was watching me. I got in the car, shook off the weird feelings, and turned the radio up loud to distract myself. I started driving down the road with my brights on as there are many deer in the area. Making a right turn onto another road, my headlights caught a glimpse of something. It was black, quick, and jumped from the roadway onto the side of a steep hill on the opposite side. I was scared at this moment and afraid to drive past this area. For the remaining drive, I kept trying to rationalize what I had just seen. Was it a deer, some animal, maybe an alien? The possibilities were endless, but I had never seen anything like it. When we made it home, the nightlife noises were back and thriving. There was no eerie feeling that something was lurking nearby. A few weeks had passed, and I spoke with a neighbor that lives 10 minutes away. We live way out in the country, and she said some weird things had been happening around there. I thought maybe she meant a thief or coyotes were around. Then she said, "You might think I'm crazy, but," and goes on to tell me how silent it would get at night more often. There were some dark figures that they had seen, not just her, but also a few other people that lived nearby. I told her of my ordeal and explained exactly what I had seen because I'd never seen anything else like it. She asked me, "Did it look like a Dementor from Harry Potter?" "Oh my God, yes," I replied. She then told me her sister-in-law was out visiting and left after it was dark to go home, driving close to the area where my house is located. My neighbor gets a call from her sister-in-law, screaming and crying hysterically. They drove to where she was, and she was too scared to even open the car door. They convinced her to finally get out of the car. She was shaking and could barely speak, but she managed to tell them that as she was driving past the same spot where I saw the figure, something emerged from the woods. It was tall, black, and seemed to glide across the road in front of her car, disappearing into the darkness. They brought her back to my neighbor's house, where she calmed down enough to explain what had happened. She described feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and coldness, as if all warmth had been sucked out of the air. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched even after they brought her inside. After hearing her story, I realized we weren't alone in our experiences. There was something strange happening in our quiet rural community. We never did find out exactly what those dark figures were, but from then on we were always a little more cautious when driving or walking alone at night. It was a summer we would never forget, filled with mystery and a lingering sense of unease whenever the night fell silent. What follows is the story of the most terrible night of my entire life so far. I haven't told anyone this story online before, and only a handful of my friends and family even know this actually happened. I will try to tell it as best as I can, but if I'm honest, my hands are trembling as I try to recall the events of that night. We live in Delhi, India, and it was our first ever road trip, which we planned to drive down to Kolkata. We booked a rental vehicle from a company called Zoomcar, which came with a few problems as the staff on duty didn't seem to know anything about the booking. But eventually, after some complaining, we managed to convince them to rush through some paperwork with a bribe, and they got us the rental license. Anyhow, we managed to actually get our vehicle without much time wasted, and we were very excited to finally be on the way to Kolkata. About 60 kilometers away from Howrah, which is a suburb of Kolkata, at about 9 that evening, we acquired the necessary things, which were obviously cigarettes and beers that we purchased from a local bottle shop. We would drink them on the way to save some time. We stopped briefly to have our dinners at a roadside restaurant, then carried onward towards Kolkata. A few hours later, closer to midnight, we were rolling along this big Indian highway, listening to that Avicii song, I Took a Pill in Ibiza. We were in the car, smoking cigs, and listening to the songs. Our playlist was fantastic because everyone was a music lover. There were 8 of us in total, so it was quite the ruckus inside the van. I was sitting in the middle seats at the window behind the driver's seat. I lit a cigarette, and I was feeling incredibly relaxed. I had cracked the window and the cool breeze was touching my face. I was playing songs and was just scrolling Instagram feeds. Everyone was enjoying it. It had been raining slowly from the evening, but around 1:30 a.m., our driver lost control. The car smashed through the metal fence at the side of the road and fell into a deep pond. For some minutes I was rendered unconscious, but the water level soon stabilized, and we looked for the first chance to get to safety. The one who was sitting in the front next to the driver's seat broke the windshield as it was already cracked. We got out and we were drenched in water. I took my phone, as it was my phone playing the song Rich Love by Honor Republic. Everybody else's phone was nowhere to be found. Nobody was hurt, except 3 of us, including me. I was bleeding in the rain, and my light t-shirt was drenched with blood. I was bleeding from my ears and fingers of my right hand. I couldn't stop the bleeding. Simultaneously, the one who was driving got hurt in the legs from the accelerator, and the one who was sitting next to him got hurt in the ears and nose. I got myself out of that pond, taking the support of my friends and the wrecked car. My friends managed to recover 2 phones, one of which was useless, and the other survived because it was an iPhone 7, which acted as a savior to call emergency services. When we left for the hospital, I was feeling cold from blood loss, and the EMT provided me a towel soaked in water to stop the blood, which was pouring out from my ear. We called other friends to wait for us in the hospital. When Baiwani arrived, I got 7 stitches in my ears, and my friend who was sitting in the front seat got 5 stitches. The other one who was driving didn't take the treatment. We reported the accident to the Zoomcar staff. We got the case settled in the police station by paying them, of course. We were all released from the hospital around 5 in the morning, relieved and thankful to God for our safe return to our homes. The thoughts of that night are terrifying, and it haunts me sometimes. I didn't get into a car for months, and rain scared me for many days when I saw it on the road. I thanked God for giving me another chance to live this wonderful life and to be a part of this enormous world. I am willing to live this life in a more different way and take the chances that I didn't take before. The nightmares of the accident still haunt me. After this accident, I went on many trips, and we stopped one time at the spot of the accident and exhaled the trauma out together. It was just for the fear which was deep inside whenever I sat in a car or whenever a rainstorm arrived. It was basically all about feeling good and getting rid of the fear and terrible thoughts of that night. We drive safely now and nothing has happened since, not a scratch. After that night, I would like to share one more thing, which is a little bit shocking. On one of the many trips, we got the same red color van which was with us that night at 2 a.m., drenched with water and blood. Nobody noticed except for one friend who told us the next day and showed the car number plates. We were surprised, and there was silence with a smile on everybody's face. Experiences come from bad experiences. Never stop living and grow through what you go through. Lyle Thomas McCann was born near Red Deer, Alberta, on August 24, 1931, as part of a large family of Scottish descent. He met his wife Marie in Torrington in the early 1950s, and the couple married just a few years later, eventually moving to St. Albert in 1964, where they lived ever since. Lyle was employed for most of his life as a long-haul truck driver, making journeys all over Canada and the United States to support Marie and their 3 children. On July 3, 2010, Lyle and Marie McCann left their St. Albert home for a vacation. They had been planning a road trip, to be exact. The plan was to pick up one of their daughters on the 10th of that month, when she landed at the Abbotsford International Airport. On the day of their departure, they were spotted by witnesses at a Superstore gas station, filling up the tank of their 1999 Gulfstream motorhome with a green Hyundai Tucson attached via a trailer. It is believed that the couple drove down the Yellowhead Highway on their way to the airport. However, on the evening of July 5th, Canadian firefighters received a call from a member of the public informing them that a motorhome was on fire at the Minnow Lake campground just outside of town in Edson, Alberta. Emergency services rushed to the scene, putting out the fire and searching frantically for any injured victims. No bodies were found, but investigators made a chilling discovery: the motorhome had belonged to Lyle and Marie McCann. Strangely, in addition to no bodies being found inside the home, the couple's green Hyundai was missing. Initially, hopes of finding the couple were high, but once the Royal Canadian Mounted Police visited the McCann's home and found no one present, hopes began to dwindle. The McCanns had planned to pick up their daughter Trudy from Abbotsford International on July 10th, but when the McCanns failed to arrive at the planned date and time, their daughter Trudy Holder began to worry. It wasn't like her parents to be late, and if they were, it went without saying that they would have notified her in advance. She tried to contact them but received no response. By this time, it was clear that something was terribly wrong. On July 10th, the same day Trudy had expected to meet her parents, she reported them missing. A massive search effort was launched, involving police, search and rescue teams, and volunteers. Despite the extensive search, no trace of the McCanns or their vehicle was found. As days turned into weeks, the hope of finding the McCanns alive began to fade. The missing couple's case attracted widespread media attention and speculation. On July 16, 2010, the couple's missing Hyundai was found deep in the woods near the Minnow Lake campground, where their motorhome had been discovered. The vehicle was hidden under thick brush, adding to the suspicion that foul play was involved. The case took a darker turn when Travis Vader, a local man with a criminal record, became a person of interest. Vader had a history of drug offenses, theft, and violent behavior. He was arrested on unrelated charges, and during the investigation, police found evidence linking him to the McCanns' disappearance. In July 2011, a year after the couple vanished, Vader was charged with their murders, even though their bodies had not been found. The trial was complex and controversial, with many questioning the evidence against Vader. Despite this, in September 2016, Vader was found guilty of second-degree murder. However, this conviction was later reduced to manslaughter. Vader was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 7 years. The case remains one of Canada's most haunting mysteries, as the bodies of Lyle and Marie McCann have never been found, leaving their family and the public without closure.